A real challenge for a lot of organizations is to solve their problems. And oftentimes they get bogged down or slowed down because they actually are just treating the symptoms all the time. And even just treating symptoms can lead to exacerbating the problem or put us into some kind of positive feedback loops and increases everybody's resources and cognitive load, and the problems never really go away. It's even difficult in our individual lives. For example, if somebody has a problem of being late everywhere they go, this may actually be a symptom. It may be a symptom of social anxiety, that they just don't like getting early and having to interact. It could be a symptom of them not getting enough sleep. Maybe they're tired all the time, which puts them off schedule and running late. Or perhaps they just put too much into their schedule. Maybe they try to do too many things. And so by being too busy, they are never able to get anywhere on time. And so that symptom really is just being late, and it won't be solved or actually resolved until you take care of the real issue or the problem. Now, in an organization, we count on our leaders to do that for us, to help us to sort through what are the symptoms, to ask enough why questions to get to what the real problem is. And, as I've worked with organizations, I think I've started to understand that, how to identify the difference between problems and symptoms. This week, though, I saw a quote from Ray Dailo, and it was a nice little aphorism, but it took me some head scratching to kind of get to all of it. It says, "Don't mistake a cause of a problem with the real problem." I think maybe to help unpack this and to really think about it, it might be good to talk about a scenario of a district that happened. And so some of this is pretty much how it happened. Some of it's changed a little bit just from patterns of others so that you get an idea. But you can start to really look as we talk about this story about, what is the problem? What is the cause of the problems? And what are the symptoms? And, getting to what's the real problem. And sometimes that takes a lot of scraping around. So the district we're looking at is a rural district, bigger than a small district, has several schools, around a dozen schools, and they have a new board and also a new superintendent that has come in. And she or he, as the superintendent, has inherited a lot of problems. There's a declining student enrollment. There is too many school buildings within the district. There is also a problem of they're not going to be financially solvent in the next few years. There's also some underperforming schools that need to be improved. And, also there's a problem of recruiting and retaining quality teachers. So there's a lot of things that go with this, and the board has started tackling it. And when you come in, some of this treating the symptoms again is a triage. But as they were going through, they've started to make some really good decisions, and they've looked at stuff. And one of the things they realized, we are going to have to close schools. So in anticipation of that, before they actually close schools, they thought about the fact that they're going to have to do some consolidation and moving around. And of course, that also means the leaders at each school is going to have to move around. So in anticipation of that, they decided to start moving some of them around. And some of that is to take your strongest leaders and put them at the schools that you think that you will have. Also, for example, if you're consolidating your middle schools, you would take a strong leader at the main middle school where you're going to pull them all together later on. So this is a good idea. And also by moving principals around, you put them in a new context and you can really see their capabilities, as a leader. Was it some of it contextual and just based off the neighborhood they were in, the socioeconomic, maybe also how the structure was set up, maybe the teachers, you can look and see and get a little better idea of the capabilities. So it was a very good plan. But when it was presented to the board, it got shut down. Part of it, you may say, well, why? Let's look. Maybe it was they presented it too close to the school year. They wanted the principals to have more time to get acclimated to this idea and to do it. Maybe there just wasn't enough details in the plan. All of these things could have been there. And, so then the superintendent steps back and she or he thinks about this and they're a little upset. And then, maybe they said, maybe should have, brought this implementation earlier. Maybe we should have done something else with it. But now they see problems and, symptoms here, So one thing they may see is, well, now we're going to have some incompetence happening. Or they may see now we have a mistrust among the board. They didn't trust us in making these decisions and doing what we felt was the best thing for all the schools and all the students. And they may even say, and it was even some of these board members who just disagreed. We can come up with all kinds of things that happened. But one thing to consider too is when the new superintendent came in, they also did some hiring and getting some companies in. And these hirings in this company was actually also previous connections. So without a very transparent interview process, without even doing a request for proposal with the companies and partnerships and just matching up, it looked like it was cronyism and favoritism that was happening. A lot of people in the community thought this might be the case because they already knew about those connections. And also they figured the board probably knew about it and was comfortable with it. And so, a whole bunch of symptoms of mistrust will happen there. Also lowers morale. We know all of these things that can come into play when we work in this fashion. But also, as a leader, when you do that, you set a precedent and you tell people that it's okay in our culture to do this, that you can bring in favoritism and cronyism into your decision making. And so how we feel about people as friends can also come into play when we make the decisions about what's best for students. And so what happened really was that some people were upset about some of the principals moving because they care about them. And they reached out to the board members and let them know how they felt about it. And so that's what brought it about. But you see, earlier it was already set to the board that it's okay to operate in this fashion. When the superintendent does it and the administration does it, they also see. And the problem, though, in school districts, when you behave this way, it's pernicious. It actually trickles down. Then it's okay to have cronyism and favoritism in the way we promote and hire teachers. And then eventually it reaches the students. And people think it's okay to even play favorites among the students. And so it can cause a lot of problems in there. And again, these look sometimes as symptoms, or we don't even see them as the real problem that keeps us from doing all of those things. And a kind of final thing to think about too, as we look, sometimes we do create our own problems. Sometimes we're then blinded by the symptoms. Sometimes we come up with our own excuses. Hey, I'm a new coach. I can bring in my assistant coaches, or it's okay in this situation because ... I have these reasons. But we forget again too that we're creating a culture. And they say you should lead by example. And the reality is, if you're leading, you are leading by example. And you have to be careful which examples you lead by. Please use the comments below to tell of a time when you identified the real problem, where you were able to cut through the symptoms and the causes and to look at what really the problem was and what solution you were able to find. Thanks.